This is a recording of Charles F. Drumm of 872 Twin Brook Road, DeWitt, Michigan, 48820. Charlie's phone number is area code 517-669-6431. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on May 8, 1989, at the History Center at 4000 North Grand River in Lansing, Michigan. This is tape number 1 of 2 tapes. Well, Charlie, if you could just start with maybe your name, address, and phone number, if you would.
Okay, my name is Charles F. Drumm, standing for Franklin.
Okay.
And I live at 872 Twin Brook Drive, DeWitt, Michigan.
Okay, what's your zip over there?
The zip over there is 48820.
Okay.
And my phone, of course, starting with the 517 at 669-6431.
Okay, great. Maybe then you could take us back to when you started at Oldsmobile and what you were doing.
Okay, I started at Oldsmobile in 1942.
Okay.
I transferred in there from Fisher Body.
All right.
As I followed the last car or the last body that was built just during the war, and was sent over to interview with the assistant comptroller. At that time, I think his name was Sanders.
All right.
To interview for a job in the time department. And I and a young man by the name of McLean, both came from Fisher Body, and we joined the time office at Oldsmobile.
So you were here at the local Fisher plant.
I was here at the local Fisher plant.
What were you doing over there, Charlie?
I was on payroll auditing.
All right.
Prior to that, I worked on the hardware line.
At the Fisher, right in the plant?
At the Fisher.
When did you hire in over there?
I go back to 1939.
39?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, as I said, when the war said, well, you can't build any more cars, why, it was a question of, would I accept a job outside of town with Fisher Body or not? And I said, no, I wasn't keen on transferring out of town, so they sent me over to interview for a job at Oldsmobile.
Okay.
I interviewed there and was accepted by Sanders and wound up in a time office over at the Forge plant.
Oh.
And I was there until I was pulled into the service.
Okay. When was that, Charlie?
In 1945.
45, late in the war. Then.
Late in the war,
Okay.
and I spent 13 months, about 8 of it overseas.
What did you do at the Forge plant then? What kind of tasks does a time person
Time
do?
office work.
What does that involve?
Well, time office is writing up the time, going out and checking the employees to see where they are on the job, and whether they're transferred to a different department. So, and then of course, always on payday, distributing the checks. And
Okay.
And I worked over the period of time I was there. I worked all 3 shifts.
Oh, really?
At different times.
What were they making at the Forge plant at that time, Charlie?
At the time we were making bomber parts and shells. They were machining shells and so on for the war effort.
Where was your office?
The office was just inside the gate, the main gate, and in the main part of the plant.
Okay.
Right by the big presses, just close to the big presses. And we were down, probably 50 to 100 yards away from Mike Bender's office and Fox. They were the They were the personnel people.
All right.
And at that time, we had probably 3 to 4 people per shift because the plant employed, I guess over 2,000 people.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes,
A lot of folks.
There were a lot of folks there,
Uh-huh.
both men and women.
Uh-huh.
And well, as I said, I left there to go into service,
Yeah.
and then when I did get back, I stayed home for about 3 months, getting things caught up around the house, and finally went back to work at Oldsmobile, and I was put back at the forge plant on the time office.
Okay. When would that have been now?
Well, that would have been in 46, late 46.
All right.
And I asked, trying to remember the man's name, I can't remember it exactly. He was a colonel or something in the Guards. I asked him if I could get a job on salary, because when I was gone in the service, the time department people voted in the union.
Oh.
And the plant management switched them over to hourly right away.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, they didn't want a union on the salary
Salary
force.
range. Uh-huh.
So I wasn't entirely satisfied with punching a time card, so I asked for a job. I had done some mechanics work in the service and prior to that time. And I was sent over to interview with G.R. Montgomery in the service department in Building 60.
Okay.
And he immediately said, "You want the job? You're hired." And what the job turned out to be was adjusting AFA claims. That's the affidavits for adjustment
Mm-hmm.
on the cars. It seemed that they had a backlog of thousands of these things. And J.J. Dobbs was there.
See, he was
A service manager.
Okay, service
Yeah.
manager. All right.
And I remember his calling, there was about 3 of us calling us in, and he said, "Well, fellas," he said, "I want you to clear this stuff out as fast as you can." Well, obviously we did, and an awful lot of claims were paid without much thought given to whether they were legitimate or not. It was just to get rid of the paperwork. And we each had 2 girls working for us to get these claims out. Then
Did
after-
all? Excuse me, Charlie. Did they?
Yes.
Did they all come back to the plant then? Nothing was settled back at the dealers.
all came to the plant.
Wow.
Every bit of it came to the
Isn't
plant.
that so?
And the files were, well, a complete roll of files were just piled 2 feet deep with these claims.
Oh,
We had
wow.
a job to get rid of. Well, after about 6 months, J.J. Dobbs called us all in the office one day, and he said, "The word has gone out," he says, "from this office," he said, "that Santa Claus is dead." He said, "From here on in," he said, "I want you people," he said, "to reject as many claims as you can." He said, "In fact, I'd like to have you reject anywhere up to 50% per day." And he said, "That means picking anything apart." So we rejected claims if they didn't have a period or a comma in the right place and so on, and sent them back.
Okay.
But as it turned out, we finally got the job cleaned up pretty well.
Did you have to analyze them, Charlie? How did
yes.
You must have.
By the wording
Okay.
that was on it. And going back to our manuals and so on,
Mhm.
as to whether it was proper or not. And
Do you remember any? Were there any peculiar areas that were always a problem in that era?
no, well, yes, in some senses. Of course, I worked there when they first developed the V8,
All right.
and we had a lot of block problems.
Okay, this would have been the rocket.
The rocket
V8.
engine. Had a lot of block problems.
All right.
sand holes in the blocks.
Oh,
and
I
so
see,
on.
porosity, that's
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Nothing really major, although we still did take care of some warranty items from way back when, like
yeah.
broken axles.
Mhm.
There was a period where they had broken axle, and Oldsmobile was committed to take care of that for life.
Oh, yeah.
And we answered some of those. But no, it varied, anything
Yeah.
from engine problems to trim problems to paint problems,
Okay.
body work.
It's the run of the mill.
The run of the mill.
Mhm.
And you got to know, each one of us had a certain section of zones,
Okay.
like Detroit and Cleveland or
Right.
Cincinnati and Milwaukee and so on. And you got to know all those various dealers in there pretty well, and you knew pretty well who was pulling the scam on you.
Oh,
And I don't think it was necessarily always the dealer that was pulling the scam, but it might have been some of the people that were working for him.
uh-huh.
And that is where we as adjusters would contact our people, our service people in the field
Mhm.
and say, we'd like to have you go in and examine
Oh,
this dealership. And we did. We pinpointed quite a few.
okay.
They were definitely taking all the money they could get.
Mhm.
And of course,
Did you keep track of all that stuff somehow in those days by dealers?
Just by
or
hand.
Just all by hand?
all by hand, we didn't have
Uh-huh.
anything going
Yeah,
as per se on a computer.
yeah.
The only computers that were available at that time was downstairs below us in material control.
Okay.
And they were just doing basically payroll operations.
Oh, all right.
Because that was run by Harold Blow, who had been in the payroll department.
Okay.
Well, then I went through J.J. Dobbs, Harry Eckblade, Elmer Cole,
Oh, okay.
and wound up with Bill Buxton as
Oh,
service
all
manager.
right.
Okay, with Claire Oxendale as his
Yeah.
assistant.
Yeah.
Well, in the era of
This would have been about when? Can you place that about in time?
probably, trying to remember when Bill was there the last time. I think that dates back to about 56 or 57.
All right.
57.
Okay.
Prior to that, I had started, with the assistance of Reg Burns from IBM, we started on an IBM system
Okay.
to process these tremendous claims that we got in there. And it was a tub file job.
Yeah.
And we had,
Explain a tub file. People
Okay.
50 years from now will wonder what that is.
well, a tub file merely is a place where you have IBM cards, pre-punched cards with names on them
Okay.
in a file.
Yeah.
And the girls would take the claims, read what's on there, and they'd go to that tub file and pull out that particular pre-punch card.
This is like the dealer's name or something? The dealer's-
Well, it would be a part name,
Oh, a part,
perhaps, a
okay.
part name,
All right.
so on. So that they would take the accumulation of these things and we'd take them and have a dealer's name pulled ahead of it,
Mhm.
which would be the dealer's name on the claim
Yeah.
and on all these parts, and the amount of labor which
All
he
right.
requested, which is on a card. Then we put it all into a computer and it would just add all of those up and
Mhm.
spit out the total.
Okay.
And then it would come out and print the whole thing on a
Okay.
piece of paper.
So you had bushels of cards?
Oh,
at
yes,
that time,
yes, and we probably had, at least 8 to 10 girls pulling those cards.
Mhm.
And then we had about 8 or 9 girls on key punch and the verifying machines, where they key punched information in, and the girls, of course, had verified it. The
And-
verifier is merely something that verifies that the key puncher punched everything correctly.
Kind of like a checker.
Checker, yes.
Okay.
In fact, go back that far, I had Sally Mahoney working for me.
This sounds like Bill
That's
Mahoney's
Bill Mahoney's
daughter or something.
daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in-law,
Yeah.
okay.
And she was from, kind of an interesting thing, she was from Brutus, Michigan, which
Okay.
is up north.
Yeah.
I remember when she first came when I first interviewed her, Tom Shields sent her over. And I said, well, Tom, I said, why don't you send someone else over? I said, I'd like to, I'd like to be able to make a choice. And he said, Charlie, he said, I don't think that would be very wise. He said, isn't she a good girl? I said, well, she appears to be. And he said, well, why don't you hire her? He said, I think it would be the smart thing to do. I said, okay.
Good old Tom.
Good old Tom. See? Well, the wonderful part about this whole thing, Sally Mahoney came to work and she said, I don't want anyone to think that I got this job because of my father-in-law. And she said, you just give me all the work you can. And I used to pile the work on her, and that girl just zipped through that stuff just like nothing.
So she was good.
She was tremendous. Probably one of the best girls I ever had. But the laughable thing was that come Friday afternoon or something, I'd get a call from Bill Mahoney. He'd say, Charlie? Yeah. What is it, Bill? He said, well, how are things? He said, kind of slack over there today? I said, well, not exactly. Well, what are you getting at? Well, he said, I wondered if Sally could get off a little early so we could make a trip north. I'd say, sure, Bill. But she was a whiz-bang. Well, anyway, that's beside the point. That's just a little anecdote we had. It was laughable, and I always liked Bill. Anyway, he was quite a card. But we, back in, I think it was 57, there was Bo Lunsford he had a separate parts and accessory computer area.
Okay.
And that was over the building opposite 62, I can't even remember, 64, I think.
Okay.
And we were, of course, up above the Harold Blows outfit.
Okay.
And it turned out that all three of us finally joined together.
You were actually three separate groups.
Yes.
Three different areas of the plant, so to speak.
Yes. And so...
And doing similar kinds of things, so to speak?
In a way, all of it was similar, but then dissimilar too.
Okay.
Because they were in parts and accessories, and we were doing AFA work, the warranty work, and they were doing payroll and things of that nature downstairs.
Okay.
So what happened was that they expanded the area down there in the basement where material control was, and Mo and myself, our outfits joined theirs.
Okay.
And we were all moved down into the basement. And
did you change your then supervisory chain at that juncture?
at that juncture, yes, to some degree. Although there was, I'll go over it briefly, the Mike Boughton was an assistant to Harold Blow.
Okay.
And H.S. Brown was the director, if you will, of material control. And we were working for Brownie at that point.
Okay, so you actually moved over and were working for Brownie now
Yes.
instead of for the service.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. In a sense, we were working for him. We were actually working for Blow almost on a par with Brownie
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
And Margaret Redding was in there.
Oh, yeah.
She was the head of the key punch.
Mhm.
And Mo was still in charge of his section, and I was in charge of our section. And then we had Clarence Cantine, who was on the afternoon shift,
Okay.
and Kenny Broadberg, who was on midnight shift,
All right.
and Bob Slappy, who worked directly for H.S. Brown, was still controlled his portion of it.
All right.
So when I say we were on par with Brownie, we weren't. We were on par with Slappy.
All right.
Okay. So that went on for quite a number of years, and over the period of time, we changed computers as fast as
Yeah.
IBM would.
What was kind of the first one you can remember there? What was the thing?
I try to remember the name of the number of the computer, but it was a huge thing. It took up a space bigger than this conference room,
Okay.
and it was all tubes,
Vacuum tubes.
vacuum tubes, computers. I really can't remember the name of the thing at this point.
That was in that south wing in the basement of Building 60.
That's right. That's right. And of course we had train and air conditioning and window air conditioning and open the doors when that wasn't working, so
Okay.
that you could keep the things cool.
Yeah, there must have been a ton of heat coming out of that many vacuum tubes.
Oh, it was horrendous. And
Who was maintaining that stuff at that time? Were we
IBM.
doing- IBM was doing the work.
still was our maintenance people.
So if you blew a tube, they'd go figure out what it was and find it.
Yeah, you had to call them. Of course, you were down at that period.
Yeah.
But
Did the tube system, about when did that start? When did we get one of those things?
well, I've got to go back again. Trying to think when we started in '54. It probably started around '52. Someplace
52?
from there. When we started with the tube system.
Okay.
And they had two of them in there.
All right.
Two big computers. But then after we had joined them in '57,
Okay.
we got our first 1401.
All right. Which is that a tube machine
No,
or
no, that's
a solid state machine?
Yeah, solid state. And that was an 8K machine.
8K.
8K.
8-hole K.
8-hole K. That was a new. And then we wound up doubling that and getting another one with 16K.
Uh-huh.
And we did one bunch of work on that, all of us,
Uh-huh.
on those two computers.
Now, were we doing our own, the
Our-
programming and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff?
yes, yes. We had a crew, program crew, part of which was Dick Havens
All right.
and Jim Troy and Mac McMinn, a fellow by the name of McLean. Doing our own programming. And of course our own key punching input and so on.
Now, there were things called boards back in those days, weren't
Mhm.
there, where you hardwired things? Or
Yes.
Was that part of this task?
That part of it too.
And that's, what were those for?
Well, the boards that you put in back in those old machines, I mean, that was your program. That was a hardwired program.
Okay.
That wasn't the type of program that you put in for memory,
Uh-huh.
that you put in memory and then that spills it all out.
Yeah.
These were great big boards that you,
With wires all over.
yeah.
And so you had one for this job and one for that job?
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And
they were,
you stashed them away down there someplace?
yeah, you had cabinets up to the ceiling with big boards stuck in
Okay.
there, and you just had to go and pull that out, put that in the machine. So, no, that's what the programmers were doing.
Mhm.
They'd sit down and devise that, and then the operators would take that board after it was done, and slam it in the machine when they needed it.
Yeah. Did you have, you must have had what I'll call the typical problems of the day. What can you remember back to the kinds of difficulties that might have existed with that kind of machinery?
Well, with that kind of machinery, you sometimes wound up with some printer problems. You sometimes wound up with loose wires in some place, you know.
All right.
A wire fell out.
Okay.
And all of a sudden the program wouldn't process. So you would call the programmer and say, hey, something wrong with this. Or maybe you had a change that had to be done. So they'd have to rewire that board.
All right.
Those were some of the typical problems that you had. And of course then the occasional tube would blow.
Yeah. Which always happened at an appropriate time, I assume.
Yeah, it always happened when you didn't.
Did they have regular maintenance on those things?
Oh,
If
yes.
They came and switched tubes all the time, or so that you would normally have things running?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a regular maintenance crew on standby,
Yeah.
and they always had a certain time when they would go over things.
Mhm.
But that didn't stop it.
Okay.
Entirely stopped the problems, because just like examining your car, you know, I mean, and all of a sudden something does go wrong.
Sure.
You don't find out.
Did the change from tubes to transistors, how did people feel about all that at the time it happened?
Well, I think in a sense the people felt that it was much better. However, it changed the whole outlook as far as the programming section was concerned, and they all had to go to school, pick all this all up brand new again. And along with that, so did we as supervisors, and so did the operators. We had to go to some training. But the speed in which we were able to process, the amount of space that it took, you know, less space and so on, less heat. And so it was a gain for all of us. And of course what we continually did with that was every time IBM announced a new machine, Harold Blow says, let's get it, you know, and we got it.
And there was no resistance on the part of management to upgrade it, so to
None
speak?
whatsoever, because they could see the value of what we were doing, the output of what we were doing, because we were processing our own payrolls there for the whole plant. And like I said, doing all the warranty work, doing all the parts and service work, all the material control work. It was just great, really.
And you were running kind of 3 shifts, you mentioned?
Yes.
Was that running the machinery 3 shifts? Or?
Running a machinery 3 shifts, yes.
All
We
right.
had Clarence Cantine on afternoons and Kenny Brodberg on midnights.
All right.
And they had their own operators there, and those machines were running 24 hours a day. And of course, we always had some repair people from IBM, either there, one man there on each shift, in case we had a problem.
You had the big crew, must have been on days, though,
days,
your key
yes.
punchers and all those kinds
Oh,
of
yes,
people?
yeah. Yeah, the key punchers, not until later did they, not until sometime later did they get into a couple of shifts operation. But mainly they were just on days, and they covered that pretty well.
And the early start of all of this was on cards then? That's where you got started, with the little IBM punch cards?
Yes, Cup files.
Yeah, all right. Well, okay, then continue. I kind of got you stuck in that era a little bit. What?
Well, I guess I was trying to harken back when we moved into Building 70, and I can't pinpoint the year on that.
That would have been about 66, maybe somewhere in that time frame.
Could have been when that building went up.
Yeah.
The Taj Mahal.
Yeah, right.
But that was a horrendous job. In the meantime, of course, we picked up a 1410 and some 1401s. And we had a computer clear down the other end, in the north end, and 3 computers or 4 in the south end.
You sort of took over that whole basement.
We took the whole
Didn't you
basement
eventually?
at that point, yeah. And programmers were in one section, and the key punch in another section.
Okay.
And there was 2 or 3 computers in south end, or 3 in the south end and 3 in in the north end. And all of that then had to be moved to, excuse me, over to Building 70 in that building.
Had you started to process more things at this juncture? Were you doing more activities in the computer area?
We had people from putting engineering programs through and so on.
Oh, okay.
They came over.
What kinds of things were they doing?
Well, a lot of it was, I'm trying to think of the name of the fellow, I can't recall his name, lived out here by Grand Ledge. He was doing a lot of speculation type of engineering, you know.
Okay. Mathematics, is that? Okay, the engineering stuff then was calculations.
Calculations,
sort of
yes.
Okay.
Interesting man, and I'm sorry I can't remember
It
his
wasn't
name.
Dick Hill, was it?
No, Dick was over, but
Okay.
yes, but this was an older man that lived out towards Grand Ledge. Real brain.
Yeah.
We did help for him. So, no, Dick came on later on.
Later on, I think that
Yes.
perhaps was, yeah.
Because he used to bring things over when we were over in Building 70. Like I said, then we had that horrendous job of moving.
Yeah.
And when we did, we moved all of that machinery over into Building 70, and of course that was a blast-in enclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And had an awful time getting started over there because of the way Mr. Blow wanted it. I didn't want it that way.
Oh.
He wanted all of the tape drives, you know, facing the windows and so on.
Okay.
Where everybody could stand out in that
Watch.
hall and watch these things go around
Yeah.
and make a big show and a big splash and so on. But it wasn't convenient because all of our tape vault was in one end, and that's where he wanted to put the key punchers. So I finally convinced him that we put all of the equipment back there and put the key punchers over in a different section.
Okay.
So, and we got that done.
Yeah.
But that required an awful lot of rearranging of electrical work underneath the floor because it was all a raised floor. And of course, underneath the floor we had that CO2 dispenser, you know, in case we had a fire.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked along with those for, well, until the 360 came out.
Okay. Charlie, back up, excuse the interruption.
Yes.
Back, the disk drive business, now when you first started out, that didn't exist. They had
The tape drives.
the tape drives, yeah. You didn't have those way back in the
You
early
had
days.
them even back in that early machine.
When we had the tube type machines, we had
Yes.
some kind of
We had about 3 of them,
Okay, so
but
that.
they weren't the same kind. They were.
But that technology.
That
did
technology
exist.
did exist, yes,
Okay.
that you could put on tape. But it was very slow at that time.
Uh-huh.
And of course, when we got into the 1400 series, that's when they really put out a mess of tape drives.
All right.
Of course, that's everything then went to tape, and that's when
That started to replace cards, did that?
Yes.
Is that what was happening?
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so trying to go back on that thing, we did change from 1410 and 1400s to 360s, which were a faster machine.
All right.
And then we went to along with the tape drives, we went with disk drives.
Okay.
So we had the whirling discs with the platters
Oh, yeah.
and all the information
Okay.
on those. And we had a tremendous amount of disk drives in there. Those were basically IBM at that time.
So the disc replaced the tape, is that what was happening?
No, you still had tape,
Okay.
but the disk replaced, it just stored a lot more information.
Okay.
You know, and it was, it's a means of capturing information, and tapes became archival.
All right, backup sort of thing.
Right.
Mhm.
But your existing things were usually on the disks.
what you were working out of was disk,
Right,
was on
on
the
the
disk.
disk drives,
Okay.
yes. And we used various equipment. We had some from CDC, and some from IBM and so on. We had a mixture of equipment, but it was all good
Yeah.
equipment.
Yeah.
And we did still a tremendous amount of work, and we then got into quite a bit of engineering stuff
Okay.
that Dick Hill used to bring over.
Yeah, at some point in time, we got into the, I'll call it drawing business. Was that there? when
That-
you had that happen? Yeah.
That had just started in 1979, 1980.
Okay, so that's real late in that
Yes,
discussion.
real late in
Okay,
that
don't get to
whole
that
thing.
yet then. Okay.
That's when they came through with the new machines where
Yeah,
you could start
with a pencil.
with a
almost.
pencil.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But prior to that time, we got into the zones.
Which is?
The zones out
Oh.
there all had their IBM input machines. They used to fire the things into
For
us.
dealer orders, like?
Dealer orders.
Okay,
And send them into us.
all right.
And of course, in the meantime, all this time from the time back in Building 60 to the time went to Building 70, we were broadcasting to the line out there, telling them how to build a car.
The sequence, and what went in
Yes,
the car.
yes.
Okay.
And we had all those teletypes in there.
Now, did that exist
That existed
right?
back in 60.
Okay.
It was probably, when we started that, probably would have been back in the late, I would say the late 50s.
Okay. What did they do prior to that?
I frankly don't know.
Okay.
Frankly don't know what they did. They built it somehow.
Yeah, they must have, we made cars prior to computers. so-
Yeah. But that's when we started broadcasting, and of course we had these teletypes out there, and that our paper had form, and we knew that they were getting it
Yeah,
out there in
yeah.
various stations. And we carried that right on over into Building 70, so that I had one gal there that did nothing but keep track of that whole area. But we had great big disk drives. We had the small disk drives.
Mhm.
Big disk drives probably were, I'm going to say about 8 by 10 high.
Wow.
They were
Big
tremendous.
things.
Yeah, they were big.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually we went to the small ones. It looked like a dishwasher.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of, I remember.
Yeah,
that.
that's the later
Yeah.
ones. But
See, in all this time, Charlie, you talked about we started out with 4K and went to 16K, and well, what was happening to the memory thing? in all this time?
I should say that, yeah, the memory, obviously, when we went from 1410 into the 360 and so on, the memory just expanded
Okay.
tremendously. And so that we were able to process huge programs and all that thing. And since then, I don't know what they've got now, but I know that they've gone beyond that point,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
within the 360s. And now they still have that contact with all of the dealers and all of the zones,
Mhm.
or all of the zones. And in addition to that, now they've gone to the dealers, so that they're getting information directly from the dealers.
Okay. Each
into the
dealer's
computer.
hooked right up
Yes,
to
to the computer system. So this whole system, the whole business is moved so far,
Yeah.
so fast that it's unbelievable.
well, you were there kind of at its infancy. And
Just,
it just
yes, and I didn't get into the
started-
dealer situation
Yeah.
because that happened after I left.
I see.
But
Uh-huh.
we did hook onto all the zones while I was there.
Yeah.
And that was a big help. It at least, it told the people out in the plant what they had to know, what cars they had to build
Mhm.
from the orders that we received. And we used to, we had quite a close hookup with car distribution that way. And they used to send all that information. information back to us. But that pretty well took us up to 1980 when I quit.
That was when you retired,
Yeah.
1980. What do you think, Charlie, was maybe the most significant happening in all of that period of time?
The most significant thing, I think, is the ability of, first, the zones to let us know what orders were out there so that we could actually build the car the way the people wanted it.
All right.
And then later on, after I left, the fact that the dealers could come in here with that information without having to go through necessarily through the zones, and where they could order parts and where they could order their cars and so on. That to me was very significant. Payroll is pretty much standardized no matter where you go. And there's lots of companies do payroll.
It's just a lot of mathematics.
That's a
isn't
lot
it?
of mathematics. And right from the word go, we always put our own checks out, and hopefully they were correct.
Yeah, yeah,
But any company can do that.
yeah.
But I think the significant part was that, plus after I left, as we talked about, this being able to design on the computers.
Yeah, the actual
I think
drawing.
that's just tremendous. And you see a lot of that right now. I mean, on television,
You
you
bet.
see people talking about how they draw. So while we made strides, we made it because of the data processing industry.
Was an organization like us dragging the computer people for us, or were they out there pushing product, so to speak? Were we pulling it, or were they pushing it?
If I were to speculate, I would say that Harold Blow was pushing.
Okay. So he was actually banging people
He
out
was
there
banging people
on
out
the
there
heads to get
use.
something to do this
Yes,
job.
yes, to use it. And then I'm sure that after part of that was taken care of, then people began to realize in other areas what value it was, and then they started coming in and say, hey, we want to get on board. And Lord knows, they got all kinds of computers out in the plant. They always had Hewlett Packards and everything else out there. And the people realized the value of it. I guess from a standpoint of speed, probably from a standpoint of not having to have so many personnel around. And the help that it would give engineers.
Sure.
Certainly, it's been a boon to them, I'm sure. And I don't think that, I don't believe we could have processed by hand anymore what we do with computers. It's just
Take a
impossible.
million people.
It's an impossible task. Yeah. And it took plenty then, and still plenty now.
Sure.
But it certainly is a big step forward.
See, I'm going to take you back to a couple of places.
Yeah.
Go back to Fisher just as the war was starting. We've heard discussions that after we shut the plant down in 42 or whenever it was, that we made some Army station wagons. Did you by any chance see any of those things going through in any of the places you were in?
No, I never saw that. The one thing that always struck my mind was the last 2 months or 3 months when they were building the bodies over there, and they were taking the bumpers that were chromed and blacking them out,
Painting them?
painting them, because they didn't want, that was a war effort.
Okay.
They didn't want that chrome and metal and so on to be
Okay.
shown. So anything that had already pre-chromed, they
They
blacked
were
it out.
painting right over the chrome?
Right over the chrome.
It's kind of a big joke.
It was a joke. but it was like saving T-lead, if you remember, you know.
Yeah.
You know, this is
Part of the
all
war
part of the
effort.
war effort. You know, or like Lucky Strike, green goes to war because they wanted the green. But no, I didn't know anything about any station lines.
And then during the war itself, Charlie, you spent your time at the forge plant. Were there any peculiar precautions for security and those kinds of things that were different?
Yeah, the plant was quite secure, fenced in completely over there.
Was that a thing that was done because of the war or during the war? Do you remember?
It was during the war, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were a defense plant,
Yeah.
basically over there, making like I said, bomber parts, which we shipped to England, and machining shells,
Okay.
and upsetting them.
Now, we were building some buildings over there too, didn't we, while you were there? Or
Yes, they
built some
put additions on.
new plant?
Yes. But that was like I said, they had employed, when I left, close to 2,000 people over there. And that was a big operation.
Yeah.
And a costly operation.
Yeah,
Of course,
sure.
they were working on a cost-plus basis
Yeah,
anyway
yeah.
at that time. But it took a lot of work, and I can remember times when I put in 60 hours in a day, you know, over there. But
Did you fellas in the time office have to know everybody in the plant, so to speak?
yes. You learn to call them all by name and sight.
And you actually, did you have to go out into the plant and find people?
Yes.
And say, I saw that guy and
Oh, yeah. You
So you-
job checked.
found everybody, so to
Yes,
speak?
yes.
Yeah, and you, what, were you assigned by an area, so to speak? Each of you guys had a
Yeah,
different area?
different areas.
What did you do about the people that were off to the men's room and that sort of stuff?
Well, you tried to find them. You had
Still-
to go back and get a check. That's
Still
all.
had to come back until
Yeah.
you found that person?
Yeah, and you checked it off on your sheet. And of course, you wanted to find them because you were checking the time card rack.
Yeah.
They're punched in.
Mm-hmm.
They got to be here someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Those that weren't punched in, you assumed were sick, then you had to look and find out and make sure.
Did you ever find anybody that punched somebody else?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
So that was
Yeah,
a thing that people did.
That was standard.
So this was just a mechanic to sort those kinds of things out?
Yeah. But usually you found them on payday.
Right.
They were lined up. I can remember payroll was done. We would send it over from forge plant. The payroll was always handled over in Building 60.
Okay.
And someplace along the line, someone over in Building 60 decided to change the day when they were going to pay these fellows. I guess that was the afternoon shift usually was paid on a Thursday so they could cash them on Friday.
Okay.
And they had decided that they weren't going to do that. And Phil Beaudry was the foreman over in the hammer shop. little fellow, feisty. Of course, these hammermen were pretty big guys.
Yeah.
And I was on the afternoon shift, and I called up and I said, "Where's the paychecks?" He said, "Well, we're going to pay you tomorrow. Pay you the afternoon shift tomorrow." I said, "Well, I think maybe you ought to rethink this." I said, "because I've got about 50 guys," I said, "standing outside the office, and I can't even get out." And I said, "They're mad." And I said, "They want their money." And I said, "I'd suggest that somebody bring those checks over in a hurry." I said, "because they're not even going to go to work." And they didn't.
No
They
kidding.
stayed right there. Right outside the time office, about 50 of these hammer shop guys.
Oh, wow.
And Phil Beaudry was jumping up and down, the foreman or superintendent. And he was screaming. He wanted those paychecks so those guys could go to work. They finally shipped them over
They
to us.
did?
Yeah, they brought them over. And we stood there passing out those checks so those fellas could go back to work. But, you know, it was kind of asinine in a way of somebody just arbitrarily
Sure.
changing a time when they were going to be paid. And And it upset those fellows routine.
So they're all used to this.
They weren't striking, they just said, we're not going to work until we get paid.
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't like it.
Was the hammer shop, Charlie, dusty, dirty
Yes,
old
very
place? Or?
dirty, hot, you know, and so on. Take you back to one time when I was walking through there. One of the fellas, eventually he did die. He was pushing one of these hot billets of steel on a cart, and the floor was uneven.
Yeah.
And it was one of these white hot
Yeah.
ingots. And the cart tipped, and it fell right across his legs.
Oh my God.
And it burned right to the bone.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they got it off him, and they had to take him to the hospital. And eventually he died.
Mm.
You know.
Right.
And you run into accidents out there. Remember one fellow got pinned with a electric cart right to the wall.
Mm.
Crazy things happen. One fellow, big hammerman, a great big sliver of steel came off one of those hot ingots as it came down, and went right through his apron,
Mm-hmm.
and caught him right in a bad part.
Mm-hmm.
and Harold Boone, his name was. I can remember that. They took him to the hospital. Fortunately, it saved him. But it had some bad moments.
Were the supervisors, so to speak, in those time frames, how would you describe those kinds of folks?
They were men that were brought up with the job. They knew the job that they were supervising. They had done it.
Okay.
They were taskmasters.
All right.
They demanded perfection while being still sympathetic with the men. But
Right.
they were hard. And they ran a shop. And they got efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that was a big key word. Because that was part of our job in the time office, to write up the efficiency
Oh, was it?
reports on all of them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And there was no fudging.
Mm-hmm.
You figured it out. We had our calculators and the whole thing. And those efficiency reports went right on over to Oldsmobile. You see, that was a separate entity, the forge plant, all by itself.
Mhm.
The union was separate in a way from the other plant. Yet, a lot of our things were handled paper-wise
Mm-hmm.
over at Oldsmobile.
Okay.
So all of that stuff went back there.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, yes, I'd say they were smart, they were intelligent, they were hard, they knew the job, and they had to, because these men looked up to them.
Okay, so the men did respect them.
They respected them.
as foremen.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. We had different things happen over the period of times. I don't know whether you ever remember a fellow by the name of Wiley Beeman.
Sure.
Yeah?
Plant engineer.
Okay. Wiley got kind of snorted up one night, and he took one of the electric trucks and was running all over the forge plant. And he wound up, they were chasing him, and he wound up inside of the welding shop. And he knew they were chasing him, so he welded the door shut.
Oh, no.
So they couldn't get to him.
What a crazy thing.
But
Yeah.
they gave, I don't know, maybe a week disciplinary layoff or something like
It must
that.
have been when he was an hourly guy or something.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a guy, really. I always liked him. That was funny. Always had something funny going on over there. And we used to have our first male person was a great big, about a 5'9", 5'10" girl.
In the
Red
mailroom?
hair.
In the mail?
delivering mail at
Yeah.
the forge plant.
Yeah.
And hell, there wasn't any men, and no women around,
Mm-hmm.
just men.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, did she
I
do.
bet she got a lot of raspberries.
She sure did, and she was a knockout too,
Mhm.
really. But,
Did that work?
oh yeah, it worked fine. It worked fine. And after that, then they started putting women in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the men had to clean up their act a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. Did you see any women in the hammer shop sort of thing, or was that
No.
mostly in the
Mostly in the
machining
machine
side?
end of it,
Okay.
not in the hammer. That was pretty heavy work,
Mhm.
really. And that, the upsetters, they were really heavy. But, no, they came in and they worked on it.
Mhm. How about over at Fisher, Charlie? When you were over at Fisher, were there any women over there working?
Oh, yes, cut and sew,
Okay.
always in the cut and sew department.
Mhm.
Those were mainly women.
Okay.
And I was in the hardware department, which was close to it.
Yeah.
Women worked on very well.
Okay. How about in the time office? Did you have any women in those kinds of jobs?
Not to start with, no,
Okay.
no. No, in fact, our 3 shifts over there were all men.
Oh, man.
And I don't know what they had at Olds at that time,
Yeah.
because of course I was over there.
Yeah,
first.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But, no, I think mainly because of the close contact we had with all of the men out in their shop and so on, they probably had considered that as not being the thing to do.
Yeah.
Nowadays it would be done.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's why, for perspective, it's interesting to
Yeah,
just see
everybody's-
how that's changed.
Yeah, everybody's equal now.
Yeah.
And women do men's jobs and everything else.
Mhm.
But then it was a little different. But then it was before the war.
Yeah.
Or during the
Right.
war.
And then, when you got into the computer end of the business, except for the key punching, was that mostly men again, or were we seeing more women in those kinds of things, like programming
When-
and?
When we first started into that, it was all men in the operations end
All right.
and in the programming end.
Okay.
And the key punching was handled by the women. Key
It
punching and the
was all
verify.
women.
Yes, and the top file operations, women.
All right.
Because of their dexterity.
Okay.
Okay? Made a lot of sense,
Mhm.
really. But then as we progressed over the years, they began to realize that women could program as well as men.
Mm-hmm.
Women could run the machines as well as men, and we started putting women in those various jobs, so that we wound up with quite a few. And then after I had left, they even had women as in the supervision end.
Okay.
So, it was, but mainly it was supervision over the key punch girls, but then eventually they brought them out into the shop, into the machine.
Okay. Did the education level of people change as time went forward? How did we, in the early days, what kinds of folks were mostly in the department? Were they, I'm going to say educated, that's a bad word, but I'm thinking in terms of having had college educations and
Oh,
those kinds of things.
well, I guess to harken back to when I first got into it, that wasn't necessary. College
Okay.
was not a prerequisite.
It was not a prerequisite?
No.
All right.
And you hired someone who had the ability to understand that
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. If they didn't, you moved them into a different area.
Mm-hmm.
As times have progressed along the years, then of course you started to pick and choose, and I think you're aware of the fact that even our personnel department usually look for someone with a college education
Mm-hmm.
to send over for interviews and for you to hire.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to be pretty choosy. So most of the time we did it, except in the key punch area, we didn't need them there.
Yeah.
That being a manual type of work, and dexterity was probably the key word there.
Mm-hmm. And you needed somebody who could type.
Yes,
so to speak.
that's what I mean. Very, being able to really do a job.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't necessarily have to have a college education. But some of them in the Key Punch area were going to school at the same time, having graduated
Mm-hmm.
from college. And I know one of the gals that she was black, a real smart kid. She
Mhm.
was in there in the Key Punch area, and she went to school and made her a supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
That was the key word then. I don't want to get into a racial thing or
No,
anything like that, but sometimes we were criticized a little bit because we didn't have enough in there.
Mhm.
But the problem that existed was that some of them hadn't prepared themselves well enough in that particular end to be taken on.
Yeah.
So
Once again, education.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But when I had, before I had left, we had quite a number of blacks
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
Hispanics and so on in that area.
Charlie, what was your position when you left?
I was a general supervisor in charge of
Okay.
data processing, working for Earl Hamilton.
All right. This is a recording of Charles F. Drumm of DeWitt, Michigan. This recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on May 8, 1989. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes. Charlie, if you would, maybe you talked a little bit about some of your early supervisors and people that were your bosses, Harold Brown and Schlappe and a few of the other people in the department. Can you bring me forward in time and some of the other people that were in the department, what
Sure.
their functions were?
Sure. When I assumed the general supervisor job,
Mm-hmm.
I had the 3-shift operation in the computer room, as well as the key punch area
Okay.
as my responsibility.
All right.
And I had Margaret Redding, of course, as the supervisor on days.
She was in the key punch
Key
area?
punch area.
Key punch area.
And Dee Arnson turned out to be the supervisor on the afternoon shift.
Were the numbers of people about the same on all 3 shifts? Or did you have a bigger shift on
This
that?
was on the 2-shift
Two
in
shifts,
the key
okay.
punch
All
operation.
right.
Just a 2-shift
And they were
operation.
about the same
About the
size?
same size, yes. Then in the operations area, I had, excuse me, in the operations area, I had a group of clerical help that was, these people were the contact between the various departments and IBM, or in our area.
All right.
And they were controlled or supervised by Bob England. Okay. Then in the operations area, I had Dwayne Sherman as the supervisor on days,
Mm-hmm.
and Richard Price on afternoons,
Okay.
and Larry Bates on midnights. That's when that was the last
Yes, well, just before you retired.
before I retired. Yeah.
Okay.
Prior to that, before I became a general supervisor, I was in charge of the computer operations.
All right.
Okay. Working for Bob Schlappe, who
Okay.
was a general supervisor
All right.
at the start, and then he changed over to programming, and Havens took over that spot, R.D. Havens. And I was in charge of the computer operations on days, Clarence Cantine on afternoon shift, and Kenny Broadberg on midnight shift.
All right. And you had
And-
people working for you?
Yes, and then Mo Lunsford was in charge of the clerical help.
Okay.
And Margaret Redding then, just the one shift of key punchers at that point.
During that time, Charlie, what, like in your particular assignment, what would have been a typical days in the operations and the business job? What would go on during the day?
Well, of course, obviously we started about, I had them start about 7:30.
Okay.
And we went through till about 3:30. And our operations and during that time mainly was to keep that line going,
All right.
keep those teletypes going, and keep
All right.
and of course putting in all the input from the various other departments, you know, that had to have their work rounded up. But
Okay.
specifically, I can't tell you, but that was
No,
the main-
not just kind of
the main function for both shifts was
the
to keep
line
that
drove
line
you.
going.
The
That
line
was-
drove you.
Yes, that was the
Okay.
main function. And because once you stopped that, you stopped all those fellas on the plant.
Yeah.
They couldn't do a thing.
Yeah.
And they just screamed bloody murder.
So did you have then backup things so that if something broke, you could
Yes.
just stick over to something else and off you'd go again?
Yes, we did have. And I guess one of the things I probably failed to mention, which I was responsible for, and that was to secure data processing area. I brought in locks type, you know, where you
Oh,
push button locks
yeah,
and so on,
yeah.
so that people couldn't invade our area. And the last job I did was with the blessings of Bill Murphy, the assistant comptroller, was to get in backup power for our computers.
Oh, that's right. We must have had power failures. What
Yes.
happened? Didn't that do something?
Oh yes, that could wipe some of the stuff I had out. So I had two great big machines back there, and what used to be the area that used to be the IBM repair personnel.
Yeah.
I had two big machines put in there, and that was our backup power. That once power went down here, that flipped on over.
It was all automatic, was it? So
Yes,
it just,
yes.
you didn't even lose a cycle. It
Yes.
just went click.
So I don't know. I haven't been back,
Yeah.
so I don't know what they've got now. But I assume that that's still in operation.
Do you remember any power failures that happened before then? What happened?
Yeah, we had some power failures and some blackouts in there. You know that
You lose it.
you lost some information sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you didn't lose anything, but everything just quit.
Yeah.
And when that happened, of course, again, like I said, we being the only machine available to put the business out to the line, they had to quit after maybe about 30 minutes because they had that much leeway.
The paper had
Yes.
printed that many.
Yes, they had.
Yeah.
But after a while, if we were off any length of time, they were standing around out there.
That must
They
be
started
it.
to scream.
Uh-huh.
But, there's sometimes there was just absolutely no control over it.
You get any good phone calls from guys like the shop guys?
My neighbor down the road was always one really scream. Bob Charlotte.
Oh, yes, I remember Bob.
Remember Bob?
Sure, down the engine plant.
Yeah, all right. And he was usually the first one on the line. Really screaming. And then there was always somebody out there on the final.
Ken Ricks or Bill Slachter.
Oh, yeah. Got on the phone and said, "When you guys gonna have us back in business?" Sometimes they're unavoidable.
Yeah.
Really. It was fun and exciting, really. And it's a challenge. That was the thing. I think that's what I liked about it.
Uh-huh.
It was different. It was something that I got into more or less accidentally, but I grew up with it and I liked it. And I wouldn't have done it over. I liked the job.
Who would have thought in the 40s it would have gone that way?
That's right. not me. I had no idea, timekeeper, and processing by hand, processing all those claims by hand and so on. That was a tremendous job. Oh, the other thing I was responsible for, I guess, and that was in the 40s, was microfilm.
Oh, for what?
Miking all those tremendous amount of records that we had of AFAs.
Oh.
We got in.
Rather than keep the paper?
No, we threw the paper away.
Uh-huh.
But we had 3 or 4 files, or aisles of files, with all these AFAs in the process. And I prevailed on the comptroller to get us some microfilm and put it in the basement down there in the vault, our wall off from us. And we got that, and I'm trying to remember the girl's name, I can't. I should. She did all the miking for us. We used to take those down, and we finally got rid of that whole batch of files up there, put everything on the microphone.
Okay, that's a good.
So I felt kind of proud about that.
Yeah.
All kinds of space left then.
Yeah.
Got rid of files
Yeah.
and file clerks. That was,
Did you have to keep those AFAs kind of forever?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But that's why we had them mic'd.
Yeah.
And we had them recorded, and all we had to do was get on there and roll it onto the viewer. And
Yeah, sure. Pull out
the
what you
information
wanted.
that you needed. In fact, that continued to go on even after I left, miking and those things.
All right.
So, anytime they wanted to, the service department could pull that information back. Because frequently you get into lawsuits and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But I remember I had G.R. Montgomery, and we talked about it for a long time, and we finally went to bat with the comptroller, and they saw to it that we got a microfilming outfit down there, and it was great, really. That was back when Ernie Stoppel was there with complaints. And I don't know if you remember Ernie or not.
No, I don't.
Probably not. He's a feisty little guy. He was a complaint manager.
Good guy for that.
Yeah. But no, we got rid of all of that. Put all the complaints on microphone, and put all of the AFAs on microphone. Got rid of a tremendous amount of files and file clerks.
Yeah.
That was a big thing.
Who was-
Again, it's a labor-saving device, that's all.
Yeah.
We were happy to get it.
Who was maybe your best boss, Charlie, over the years?
Well, depends on how high up you want to go. I think probably the man that I got the most cooperation out of was Bill Murphy, as assistant comptroller. I always liked Dick Elliott. I thought he was great. And Harold Brown was a fine chap.
Okay.
I had probably many a knockdown drag out with Harold Blow, but then that stemmed back from the time that I was a timekeeper, because he was more or less in charge of that department then, with Leo Ruggles as working for him. But I won some, I lost some, you know. But
Didn't we all?
yeah, you do. And you stop and think about it, it was always good. I like Mike Bowden. He was as fair as anybody I know. But no, Harold Brown, I'd say, was a real nice guy. Earl was nice, but kind of off in left field sometimes. Nice guy. But, well, he came in here from engineering.
True,
You
yeah.
know, and He had an engineering mind and a good one, really. I think he took to it pretty well, but sometimes I thought he was off the field and I had to bring him up. He's younger than I. No, he's a nice guy. But I'd say Bill Murphy probably I enjoyed the most. Really. I got a lot of scraps with it, but
But that
there
was
again,
Ed.
I mean, that's
That
natural.
was kind of just Ed.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the way he sort of did business, so.
Oh, yeah, he'd be real tough.
Yeah. Make you prove it.
Yeah, yeah. But, no, I had fun, but that would be my choice.
Okay.
Bill Murphy.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
As I said, Harold Brown was a principal fellow. Really. I'm sorry to hear. Sorry he's gone. Really.
Yeah.
He would have been a good one then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Any other what I'll call unusual happenings you can think of back over the years, Charlie, that might be of interest to folks in the future?
well, I don't really recall other than the fact that during strike time, we were over in Building 60, and of course, the men were on the gates, manning the gates, and they didn't want anybody in there. And of course, we'd have to go over and get our supplies from Stores S, which was inside the plant. And it was always touch and go whether we were going to make it or not. We'd get over there, and I said, "You guys can't come in here." And he said, "Well, we can't come in. You guys aren't going to get paid. You realize that?" And they said, "Oh, you're from Data Processing, huh?" "Yeah." "Okay, you guys can go through." So,
All right.
you know, it depends on how it strikes you, whether you're going to. So they always let us, because they knew that's where their money was coming from.
Yeah, you must have been there then when we had that big strike after the war.
Yep.
That 120 days or however long we were shut down.
Terrible. That was terrible.
What went on during that time frame?
Well, you know, just kind of normal operations as much as you could call normal
But
operations.
nobody would have anything to do, would they?
Well, you had things to do, or you invented things to do.
Yeah.
But we still had things to do.
You would still be having stuff come in from the field, I assume.
Oh, yeah. And we still had to process things. So we
Could you get in and out of the building okay?
Oh, yeah.
They didn't pick at the building?
No, they didn't pick at 60, but they picked at the main plant.
Yeah.
And like I said, even then, we didn't have a problem because, of course, at that time I didn't have the data processing outfit. I was up
You
there
were
in the service department.
Service department,
But I'm sure that they let the fellows who downstairs in material control because they were writing the checks and everything.
Yeah.
They probably had the same problem that I ran into later on in
Yeah.
here, so there was a strike.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, once you hit their pocketbook, well,
They'll listen.
they listen, you know. But that's one thing. Oh, I don't know how many times I've had grievances thrown against me for doing some work.
Oh, for working?
Yeah,
Oh.
you know, doing somebody's work, like moving some machinery or you're not supposed to do that. You know, and so on. But they backed off.
Yeah.
It was a case of sometimes that I just felt that something had to be done and done right now, and I couldn't wait. And I'd get a group of my people together and we'd start
You'd shuffle a machine
shuffle
around.
machines around and moving stuff around.
Yeah. Those things were all on rollers anyhow, weren't they?
Yes.
It isn't like it's bolted to the floor.
No, that's for sure. We couldn't ever move it. Yeah. But, no, I had that. A lot of times I had grievances against me doing somebody else's work. But that's all right.
Yeah.
One instance I remember, we had a great big dumpster out in the back of Building 60. And there was apparently a bunch of papers on the edge of a desk. And one of the janitors inadvertently had come along and he knocked them all up into the wastebasket.
Oh, no.
And I know that one day I was out there in the dumpster, right in that dumpster, digging out these
Sorting out the paper?
sorting that
Oh,
paper
my
out.
God.
So that's one of the crazy instances that you get into. But that's another time when we were pushing a machine down the hall. And we just got it down there, down ramp, which came out of the garage. And Jack Wolfram come in there and we damn near ran over it. He was a feisty guy, I'll tell you.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any dealings with him?
Oh, yeah, eventually, but he turned out all right.
Yeah.
He was a little upset that day, but everybody gets upset in those days.
See, were you in the service department when Air Ride came out?
I believe so.
That was in 58, maybe?
Yeah, I would have been at 58, then I would have been swung over into the data processing.
So you were over there then? Okay. Good.
I was there when we first came out. I was in the service department when we first came out with tubeless tires.
Oh, okay.
I bought a car from up on the hill, and my wife and I and the two children were going to take a trip to Canada. We did take the trip to Canada, went all the way through some of the rocky places and so on. I came back and called me from the hill, and they said, "We'd like to have you come in, and we want to change your tires. You've got some experimental tubeless tires on there."
Ooh, and you didn't even know him?
No.
Oh, wow.
They said, "We want to change." I said, "Okay." I said, "Do you have any problem?" I said, "No." Fortunately, because I'd gone into Canada,
Yeah,
they didn't know anything.
wouldn't even know what to do with them.
No. So, another time I bought a car. I bought a station wagon, a used one. Had some miles on it. I got down into Ohio and had a policeman stop me from speeding. Well, in fact, stopped my wife because we just got over on the turnpike. He said, "Do you realize how fast you're going, lady?" She said, "Yeah." She says, "I saw you follow me." She says, "I was just doing what the law allowed, speeding." He said, "No, lady." He says, "You were doing about 15, 20 miles faster." Well, it turned out they had the wrong speedometer.
Oh, really?
In that, yeah.
Oh.
I had to take that back, get that changed.
Unusual.
Yeah, he did give us a ticket, of
Yeah.
course. He said, "Just behave yourself."
Just remember your 15 miles an hour high.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Those things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I told the guys in engineering, I said, "You almost cost me a ticket." I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, your things happen. One car I had, another station wagon I had, my wife was driving in the south part of town. She, the car stopped on her. Absolutely stopped right in the middle of the intersection. So she didn't know what to do, so she called my nephew, who was a Buick dealer in Lansing. And they came together. He said, "Gumby," he said, "you're out of gas." And she said, "Well, I can't be." She said, "We just filled that tank yesterday." He said, "I don't know." He said, "You're out of gas." Well, I looked at it and I had a collapsed gas tank.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So it only held a few gallons.
Yeah, it only held a few gallons. See,
Oh,
the
goodness.
needle went up and it was full. And
Oh, gee. Unusual. Yeah, unusual.
Yeah, so we replaced that. Those are instances.
Yeah.
But no, it was real enjoyable. I enjoyed
That's
it.
great.
And, I'd say this, Oldsmobile, probably one of the finest places to work that I ever worked in. I thought I was treated fairly.
That's great.
And again, like I said, I miss the people so much.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I miss now, and I wish we could go back to it, we get a general letter from the corporation, which means absolutely nothing to me because it doesn't have any personal contact. I don't know what's happened to the people. I miss that old letter that used to come out. We had
The Team magazine?
the Team magazine.
Yeah.
And, it said who got a 35-year
Mhm.
ring and who got a 4-year ring.
Yeah.
And so-and-so passed on, or this is some information about somebody. We don't have any personal touch anymore. It's gone.
That's right.
And I don't know as I'll ever get back to it, but that would be something I would recommend. And I think a lot of our people miss that. That one we get from the corporation doesn't mean a thing to me. I read it and throw it away. Yeah, no personal, nothing to do with Oldsmobile per se.
Yeah, right.
But it brings you up to date on what BOC's do.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think, when I knew Ray Lane and I knew how the fellow in the engine plant.
Summers, Steve Summers?
No. Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's okay.
Doesn't matter. But anyway, there are a few people that I knew there.
Mhm.
And of course all the retirees. We got
Yeah.
too old to so that's good. Well.
Okay, is that about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Jim.